This is, I don't know how many people here in the room are used to and remember and are familiar with what we talked about last. I know that at least one person in the room is not. The talk that we gave last Black History Month, and it is concerning Levi Gillis, the log cabin that is currently sitting on Main Street that used to be on Merriman Street. But today's talk is, I wanted to specifically make this talk a little different than other talks that I've given before, where the center has been, for obvious reasons, likely, Levi Gillis and the cabin. What I wanted to do was really take a look at and introduce the community to free Blacks that were in the area, that are known to be in the area. Now, this presentation I'm going to give is only going to be an introduction, to that. It is definitely not going to be, it's not meant to be all inclusive, because there's no way for me to be able to do that there, and that's because there are so many of them that it would not have been possible to do that. So what I'm going to do here is, let me see, let me share my screen, make sure that I'm sharing my screen with this so that, let's see, so that everybody, when they see this later on, there we go. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I called the talk then, Before Levi's House, a historian's look at the lives of 1850 free Blacks. Let me move this out of the way. So, boy, do I love maps. This is a map of 1850. It is not meant to be Howard County, but it is a section of an 1850 map that Hopkins hosts, Hopkins University Library System hosts. And this map just shows, I just zeroed in just to show, like, as you can see here, Ellicott Mills. Most of the names that you see along here at this point in time, people were trying to do the best that they could. They really were. They were trying to do the best they could to record and capture names, to record ownership, although it wasn't always ownership. It's not always ownership for what it is that got recorded on these documents, on these things, because what I have found is that would have required them to have gone and actually looked in the deed system to really be able to see what was going on. In history, in our area, and probably others as well, boy, did they make use of what's called like 99-year leases. So a person would own a property, and then they would, just be able to just go and encumber it basically with a 99-year lease, which is actually really a sweet deal. And so I mentioned that to say that some of the names actually that are found on maps, and I haven't vetted this map for the 1850 to see if it is the case on this, but I certainly know that for the Martinet map, which I have much more usage out of because it did capture a lot more of the area that is, that is Howard County. Now this, please let me just be able to, this is it's a rudimentary, well, you guys should be able, do you guys need to move closer? Can you see it? Is it good? Okay, perfect. This is a map, well, not a map. This is a compilation that I did using the 1860 census statistics. And I created it about maybe 2 years ago. The reason I created it is because in Howard County, I noticed that a lot of the organizations, history organizations, were saying, they were lumping Howard County in and saying, oh, well, our county has like one of the lowest levels of slavery in the state. And so we don't have, and so I took some time to truly try to drill down to figure out where that came from. Where is that information coming from? And I found where it was coming from. It actually was coming from, it wasn't said that way on the Maryland State Archives website, but on their county pages on the archives website, what somebody did, it was an intern years ago, I was told, when I tracked it down to find out how can we get a change. They grouped and they looked at Maryland in terms of grouping. And so what they did was they grouped Howard County with Baltimore City. And that, if anybody if you know what the statistics are like and how many free Blacks were in Baltimore City, you would understand how problematic that would be. to do that to group, because so that I say it this way. In that case, then what was happening is that Baltimore City's free Black population was actually then overly and grossly inflating our situation here. And what I knew was happening is that it was just a situation where no one had actually gone to do this, which is why I then created this. And when I did, as you'll see there, then Howard County, I took these are numbers that are as a reflection of the total population for each jurisdiction. And so I made it that for the total population and then percent of free and then the ranking, with the numbers that came out, I ranked it. And so Howard County came out in terms of the rank of free Blacks, number 15 out of 22 jurisdictions. So that's not a high number at all than free Blacks. And then the percentage of enslaved, according to the 1860 census, Howard County ranked number 9 in terms of the numbers that it had been enslaving as of 1860. But I'm really just showing this then and just because part of what I always try to do as a historian is I really just want people to, I'm also trying to teach people, and whether that's kids, adults too, which we aren't always that teachable, everything, but I try to do what I can to try to show people where the errors and where the stuff is coming from, so that is what I know will help us all to be able to have a more balanced narrative, and also to understand where we do need to be talking about some things, because what was happening before with the 1860 numbers, with that whole story of, well, Howard County, they were saying, oh, and so therefore there's nothing really to look at here. And so for decades, nobody really was. Okay. Why is it important to see history? Why is it important to have accurate information? I'm going to share with you a story that I think best exemplifies why that is. What you're looking at here is a section from an MHT inventory for HO 639. And this inventory form shows a place called the Howard's Family Home Place for Free Slaves, located in Elkridge. Now, the thing is, about this inventory and the information has found its way into a book, and I'm sure it's not just one. I'm sure it found its way into people's papers and everything else. But I want to show you something that with this write-up. This is a section of the write-up, and on here, I'm just going to draw your attention to a part that it says, William Henry Howard was a slave of George Howard, a large slaveholder who owned slaves. William Henry Howard lived in a log cabin near the Deep Run. William Henry Howard remained a slave until 1856. In 1856, he was freed. A freedom certificate was issued by the clerk of the Circuit Court of Anne Arundel County. The person who created this MHT document, what they were doing, I can always understand when I put myself in the place of everything that I'm examining. And I did in this situation too. I understood that the descendant of this person, what they were trying to do is I could see that they were trying to take pride. Everybody wants to feel pride in your family, in ancestry. So you try to find it, you try to something to celebrate about your ancestry. This person, indeed, I know, was trying to do that too. Unfortunately, the way that he did it, that he saw a path to do it, was that by taking the story of William Henry Howard, he looped it in and added in. So in the back, on the bottom here, it says, building was named in honor of John Eager Howard, but no recognition was given to slaves of John Eager Howard family who helped to develop Howard County and everything. And so they were trying to find and attach significance, and I get it. Boy, do I get it. And it's innate. I understand. This person, I think, from what I've been told, I believe that the person who did this is now deceased. And boy, do I wish that were not the case. I wish that I had caught, or that somebody had caught this man. His name is Reverend Howard. I wish I had caught him, because I would have then told him, this is the certificate of freedom information that is for William Henry Howard. And on here, it very clearly has on here, so I'm just going to put on here. This is the date, so the 1856 and everything. So this actually is for Peter Howard. So Peter Howard, the one above that is William Henry Howard. And then there was one above that too for Charles Howard. Every single one of them says on here, Let's see, where's the thing? They use the phrase free-born. Free-born, every one of them, free-born. On a certificate of freedom, what happens here is that there are people who did not, and he did not either, unfortunately, understand what a certificate of freedom really meant. A certificate of freedom did not mean that you were given your freedom. That was not the indicator for if you got your freedom or not from a certificate of freedom. This is only an indication that the men, which reframes the narrative completely for who had the power and why. William Henry Howard in 1856 asked for one. So did Peter. So did Charles. They asked first. They walked into the clerk's office and they said, I would like one. Now, why they would like one, we can't know why. But usually when somebody gets a certificate of freedom, it was because they knew that they were going to travel someplace and they thought to themselves, I don't want any trouble. So let me just make sure. Because the fact of the matter is there are a lot of free blacks, a lot of people that were either free all along or had been freed, and there is a distinction between free and freed. It takes a tremendous amount of work to be able to decipher which is which, but there is a difference between them. And so in this case, he wasn't freed, he was free, freeborn. And that just, I'll say again, I wish that I knew, I wish that I had caught him or that somebody did to let him know that, because there's power in knowing that and everything for when you're trying to find out about your ancestors. So this was a great story that I wanted to use today to explain to people and I really hope that it comes through for why it is important to have. It may seem like something really small to someone that it's just like, well, okay, well, he just had it wrong. No, thinking about whether or not where your roots really came from and where you were able to exercise power and how you were back in your past and as your ancestors, that is really a big part of the story for everybody's personal history. And therefore, it has become important for our nonprofit in terms of the way that we go about going and telling history. This is, what do I have? Okay, so now we're going to talk about another free black family. This is a deed, part of a deed. It's not the whole thing because I can't put the whole thing in here in this photo app thing here. It's a gentleman named William Williams. Now, what most people are used to doing that I find also interferes with the ability for proper discussion about history and proper dissemination of history of this time period is that people who are looking at the deeds would be looking for some evidence on here for it to be say that he was black or that he was, man of color, free black, free, something like that. But I want to show you this and for everybody that sees this, nowhere on this document does it say that William Williams was black. It's just, I don't know why. I don't live back in this was in 1816 that this was a deed. This covers our area for Howard County. And I'll show you just how prolific, with this family, to know that William Williams, he purchased this land in 1816 from John Hobbs and Richard Ridgely. Here, let's see, let me move that over so you can see it's the 1840. In the 1840 census, found him. He is right. You probably, I don't know if you can see it here. William Williams, he's right here on the census. Everything that's over on the right-hand side of 1840 indicated free blacks in households. So in this is a head of household situation here for William Williams, right here in the 1840 census. Now, things that I know, just a sampling of some of the things that I know about William Williams that I find fascinating about him and that I hope you'll be fascinated too. Everything. As a historian, what I try to do, I always try to do, is I compile records from every available source. I really just try to leave no stone unturned. And that's because I don't really care about the buildings. I mean, I do care about the buildings, but my emphasis on the people who built the buildings, the people who lived in the buildings and so forth. What you're looking at here, again, this is a court case. So this is a court listing where you can see William Williams, he was subject. Now, this was a case when it says same, the case before that, which I'll show you in a minute. It was the state who was suing, going after William Williams. And what he was going for, the date here, 1842. Okay. And this shows you here on the left-hand side in this panel that's right here. I hope you can get it showing you there. On here, these are the people that were witnesses for the state. These are people that were defendants' witnesses. So this is for William Williams. He got March 21st, 1842, judgment, penitentiary for 10 years. I can't remember if that's 2 months or 12 months. And the charge that it was arraigned. I'm going to show you in a minute what the problem was. And the way that I knew what the problem was for this is that I had to go to the entry that was right before. Susan Pumphrey, also a free woman of color, by the way. The charge was they both got charged right around the same time, present for circulating pamphlets and books of an inflammatory character. In other words, it was about getting free. Really, it was about getting. And when you were found to be circulating anything about that you should be free and we should be, slavery should end and everything else, you would go to the penitentiary, very likely, and everything else if you were caught. Now, Susan Pumphrey, she got off. They didn't get her, with it. But I'm going to go back for a second here to this one to show you. This one, what was really interesting is that here you have the witnesses. Susan Pumphrey was a witness for him as a defendant's witness, which again, then there's a common notion, and it's a bad one, to say that blacks just across the board were not able to, before the Civil War, were not able to testify in court cases and so forth. That's just simply not true. Everything. Now, what it really was, just as with the law, it's the same way today too. It's whether or not somebody actually wants to go after you, and whether or not they want to push it. Laws are on the books, to be. But if somebody's not there to actually enforce it and to go after and to try to do ever, the law's not going to do anything. Yes, Wayne.
Peter Gorman is listed there.
Yeah.
For guilty.
No, that's the jury. All these people here are the jury. Yeah. This says jurors sworn. These are the jurors: Nicholas Van Sant, Harry Gaither, William Cushion, Seth W. Warfield. I think that was the survey. I'm trying to remember if he was a surveyor. Isaac Rouse, Harry Pugh, and yes, yeah, Peter Gorman. The verdict. These jurors, they found their verdict was guilty. Yes, Chris.
Was there
I'll tell you in a minute. And then you can see, I'd have to zoom in here. I forget this was the indication of who it is that did who the attorney was. He had an attorney that was that represented him. And then they did a motion of arrest of judgment and everything, reasons filed and everything. The motion was overruled and everything else. And that's William Williams. But again, it's just, this is the stuff that I look at, and this is why it's actually not so easy to actually put together. It takes a tremendous amount of time to actually go, because then you're seeing this, and I'm sitting there. I knew Susan Pumphrey's story. I wrote her into my book, everything I'm writing. So she's in there. William Williams made an appearance, just briefly and everything else, but for a different reason. But that's because the outcomes were different, between the two. But to see this, that you just see, it just provides just a wealth of information. Well, for someone like me, it does anyway, to be able to see, this information to see. Because, and then here, this person here, this is Jacob Madden. And just hang on to that name for a second. So just remember that name that I told you that. Which is why the reason the name, it jumped off the page when I was scanning this record down at the state archives. Everything, which is where the lion's share of these records are at the state archives, by the way. Everything. Madden jumped out, and I was like, oh, Madden, he's on my list of 150 people that are in my head that I'm always looking for stuff about, and everything. And then that's what led me to William Williams. But okay. Now, again, here's the, I'll go back, so here's her information for who it is that was doing stuff, with her for her case. And you see this says March 17, 1842. Ignoramus. They're saying they decided to ignore the case and everything else, to just, there's nothing to really see here, which is why Susan Pumphrey was able to escape. She was just like, I don't know what you're talking about, whatever. And she was successfully able to beat it. But not so much for William Williams. This is penitentiary records. he did go to the penitentiary, everything. And so I found him. Everything. William Williams there from Anne Arundel County here gives this, information about him. 67 years old. Can you just imagine going into the penitentiary at 67 for a 10-year sentence at that? And everything. It gives me, his height, 5'4" or something, and everything. He was a gardener and everything. It's a little bit of identifying scar on the forehead. There's another guy here too, by the way, Wesley Green here. Also, I wrote him into my book, everything too. But Wesley Green, he also came from this area, and he was also sent into the penitentiary. He was from Howard County, Howard District, so he got sent also. Interesting story, So Wesley Green had been someone who had just been freed. This was his story, and I'm just going to verbally tell you this one because I didn't put the documents into here because I'd be here all day if I did try to go through all this, stuff. But Wesley Green, he had been set free by his enslaver, and then he was talking to someone. And I always say it this way, I can just imagine really that it was just really like literally just days after Wesley Green had been set free. He also went down to the courthouse, to the clerk's office, got his certificate of freedom, very happy about it. But within days of that, he found himself to be subject to charges. And the charges were for enticing enslaved people to run away, everything. And so with that, the whole cavalry of Howard County's elite, from a certain time period for this certain geographic area, Charles Warfield, and et cetera, they just came out and they were just furious. They were just out for blood, for him. And they just wanted him to be, because there were people that they had been enslaving, Nathan Shipley too. These are the people that they had a couple people band together and they took off, and it was thought that they were in Pennsylvania. Everything. And so they, there's a whole big court case with that too. Wesley Green was the one that took the full rap of that. And honestly, I just suspect that he was just really happy to be free, that he had finally been freed, and was probably just having some conversation, with someone about like, it's good to be free and everything and stuff and whatever. But those people who don't, again, in Maryland, in our area, this was going on too, where the whole movement to try to get free blacks out of the state and everything, because they were thought to be like that they were a threat. Their very presence was disruptive, thought to be, just highly disruptive, because they thought it was making people like, well, of course, if I'm enslaved sitting over here and I see people walking down the street, I think it would probably motivate me too. And they understood that. Wesley Green did not make it out of prison. He died there, by the way, spoiler alert. This is for, so again, the charges are here, inflammatory pamphlet for William Williams here. And then, gives information about, when he, came in, what was his, what was he going to be doing, when he was there. They tried their best to capture that information for what they would be doing while they were in the penitentiary. And then, as you can see for here, isn't this interesting? Look at that. Pardoned. Don't usually think of, again, it's just like, I have not, I actually have but I didn't have it tagged on the 10,000 images that I've been capturing for the last couple of years from the state archives, everything about Black people in Howard County for this time period. I couldn't find it for today, but I have the pardon record and everything too. And then it also gives a wealth of information for what was going on. How did that whole thing, happen? Who rallied to his, which just has these implications. I hope that everybody can understand for our interpretation of history. When you even looking back, looking further on, when there's discussions later on after the Civil War about whether or not a Black person is going to be pardoned. Well, this has implications. It's just like, which is why I don't, and why our nonprofit will just not be going out. People ask all the time, when are you going to do reconciliation? We're not doing any reconciliation until we get the truth out. None is the answer. And until there are some things that get situated and solidified to be able to show things like this, that here in history, to see that this Black man got a 10-year rap that he was facing, that he went in there and he was pardoned. Now, he pardoned there, and he's not the only one. And then, but as we go through time, people, the villagers get wild and everything else about the thought of somebody being pardoned. Yeah, it's something to look at, and something we will be looking at as a nonprofit. Okay, so next slide. Now, here is So Williams, he had, his children and so forth. Here in the 1850 census, we see, Michael Williams, that is his son, with his, I think that this is his wife and everything. They are living again, recorded as being free, 30 years old, so forth. The closest post office, Ellicott Mills, and everything. So that is here. Ann Howard, that's an interesting name too, for me, but I'll show you why in just a few minutes. So I said that Michael Williams, right? Yes. Okay. So Michael Williams, here's Michael Williams, then a deed, and this is in 1874. And his brothers and sisters are going in and they are deeding the land, everything. Michael is as the heir that's left to the family. And they are giving it to Catherine Madden. Catherine Madden is their sister, everything, who last name different. She married, someone else, everything. So here is this transfer. And then again, welcome. So that gives you an idea. That's the first tip off for how long this Black ownership land was stayed in this family. 1816, I think I said, until here we are now in 1874. And then here's another transfer. Then the family gets together again to further give land, and this time to William Madden. And in this year, it's 1881. Everything. I haven't gone back beyond that yet, because again, for purposes of this conversation, I'm just really trying to keep it like at a certain time period, certain decades. But I hope that answers your question, Christine, about, so he didn't lose his land, everything. Okay, so next thing to kind of talk about. So, and this is Kate Madden. So when I said Catherine Madden, this is her. So this is the 1870 census. And here she is with someone that's 20 years old, Jake, probably Jacob, everything, but again, calls him, refers to him as Jake. This is in District 2, so the same district, living near or got recorded. I can't really say, nobody can really say when you're looking at these old census stuff to say that they were living next to so-and-so or living near. You can guess that, but really without house numbers, which our county did not get until like the 1900s, everything, all this really tells us here for certain is that the census taker went to that household at this is the order in which they went. And so it only tells me that they went to go see Kate Madden, went to get Kate Madden, who's recorded. So he recorded here as $1,000. Yep, that's the property. That's the real estate and everything, living near the butcher. Everything. Well, maybe not living near the butcher, but got recorded, visited near the butcher, Mr. Soper, everything that was down there in Ellicott City, which, so, yeah. And then, okay, so Delia Brown. And well, I pulled this, and these are just a few things that I'm just running through. It always fascinates me too, to be able to see the age of people that were living before emancipation, before everybody got freed. In this case is 1850 census, Delia Brown, who's recorded, I think that's a 78, but the census taker, it might have just been it might be a 4. I'm not sure, because this one, this is definitely a 79, I believe here. So just seeing the ages of people, the distribution, that there were people, and we will be, I'm just on this continuing quest that, again, our nonprofit is doing. We've been doing this for the last 2 years now, of recording everything. And the reason we're recording everything is because we're creating a story map that will live online, everything, where the students can, will be able to capture, look in when they're in classrooms. And anytime somebody wants this information, again, for a certain time period is our specialty. That is what we will be able to be poised to provide to the community. And so I don't know yet how Phoebe Dorsey, was she also somebody who was born free, or did she obtain her freedom? I don't know yet. The Anne Arundel County records are a lot different to look through than the certificates of freedom for the Howard district. They are just completely, and there's no index for Anne Arundel. So you have to look through every single one, page by page. That's a lot of work. Another person, Hester Williams, who, again, I'm not sure if she is, I'm not sure whether she is 75 years old, And I know, but what I found very interesting, when you look at this, read. So this is the line that's asked you, of people, can they read or write? Or the household can it? And so same thing with John Boone, who's 70, who's a sawyer. Read. Yeah, 1850. So again, that's why I'm putting this out, because I just really want people to understand that it's no, it's a myth to say that Black people couldn't read. I mean, yeah, if they caught you spreading and trying to educate people, if you got caught, doing that, and if they wanted to come after, well, yeah, sure, and everything, you might find yourself to be, and I have the records of those people who did, have that happen to them for our county. Yes, Andy.
Either a slash or a one underneath.
There's a one, and that indicates that, yeah, that's a person who says that you can't. The question was, is this a household where the person cannot read or write? And that's indicating, yeah, that this household, yes, count it. And then the little thing right beside it, I think that's when they went back to compile afterwards. They almost like check to record, like I counted this one, this one, this one. Okay, so Jacob Madden. Now, in previous talks, I've talked about Jacob Madden, and specifically Jacob Madden, who is in our nonprofit's book, that he had been set free. He paid $200 to free himself, basically, to get free from an Ellicott. Everything. And that was the spark off for a tremendous amount of research for the last couple months that I'm just about finished. Everything, another talk, on the Ellicotts and what, about what was really the truth about the Ellicotts here in Howard County, because the stuff that's being put out, it's not accurate. It's way too general and it's way too broad. And I call it painting people with broad brushstrokes, and it just does everything stuff. So, but here, Jacob Madden found this is when he was subject to being charged, everything. And this is a document that he found himself to be charged for having somebody as they say, in his storehouse after hours. It's having somebody who was enslaved. And that was a big no-no, because again, the thought was for the enslaver, oh my gosh, let me not have, are you telling them that, that they should run? Are you trying to give them help? Are you trying to, is this basically an underground railroad, kind of situation going on and everything? And so if they've caught you, and if they, or if they heard it on good authority that you were doing this, you would find yourself to be subject to charges, everything. And this is a charging document for Jacob Madden. So poor guy is just like, he paid himself. He paid $200, and that was not a lot. That was not a little bit of money, by the way, at the time that he paid Mr. Ellicott to be free, and everything. But just a few years later, here he is in this situation, which was always happening, by the way. As I say, I can't wait till we put out the story map for this. It's going to be a whole story map and a whole website that shows just these stories about like people who were trying to resist, who were thought to be trying to resist, because this is quite a big, information. It's so much more than just like, here's a runaway ad and everything else. That's a start for something, that here's the collection of runaway ads, and I've got those too and everything. But there's nothing like this and everything to really be able to tell you the details. What is this? Because I can't see. Oh, yeah. So this is, I can see it actually better on here. I'm sorry, so I'm going to get up so that I'm talking about the right thing. So this is, yes, Andrew Ellicott, what I was talking about, yes. But he paid, he was given $200. Mr. Madden gave him $200, everything for hand and paid it in hand, everything, and free Mr. Madden. He didn't free all of the ones he'd been enslaving, by the way. Spoiler alert. And then here is another sort of interesting about Jacob Madden. So here in 1840, someone was charged with assault and battery on Jacob Madden. It's just like the state, and they went after, which is just fascinating. It's just like, wow. So Columbus Jones, and I couldn't find Columbus Jones in the census to be able to find him. But the way that I was able to find him, his dad, David Jones, who put up his bail. everything. And I mean, here's Jacob Madden, who was testifying along with these people. Now, this guy got off with, he got fined $65. Must have been a serious, he must have, I don't know what he did to him, because that's a high fine. And so, let's see. David Jones, here's David Jones. So just, however, just a few years later, and this gives me insight into the family and everything. They were from here, it seems, or maybe he was visiting. If Columbus Jones, because again, I couldn't find him in the census. So maybe I saw a Columbus Jones that was on the Eastern Shore. So maybe he was here visiting his dad, David Jones. That would be my guess, that he was visiting his dad here, that was living here in our area. And then he didn't like Jacob Madden for some reason, or maybe he thought Jacob Madden shouldn't be acting as free as he was. I don't know what the case is, but David Jones, who was in 1850, the age of 82 years old, who was from England, who was a baker and everything, died of paralysis. Here and got recorded on the 1850 mortality schedule as having died and everything. So, and let me see, there was somebody else on here that I wanted to show you, but I think I have it on another slide. Interesting to see that on that mortality. I mean, look at this information. I mean, look at this. Peter Cole and Rachel Cole. The S means they were enslaved, but this is the 1850 mortality schedule. Look at the ages here, 100, 126. Right, that's what they did. Yeah, so, well, yeah, old age. I mean, they lived a long life. But it's just like, and I have some Coles in my database, in my personal database that I've been collecting for the last 6 years now and compiling and creating, and we have to have it online, we're looking to put it online. The Cole, family, I don't recollect, couldn't find it for purposes of today to say who it is that they were enslaved, where they were living, to this age. Okay. Another thing about Jacob Madden. So here's another thing, everything. State warrant charging said parties with enticing away his bound apprentice. And so again, it's just like Jacob Madden is sitting there having conversation. In this case, it's with Evan Scott is probably the person who, and it wasn't that Evan Scott was enslaving. Evan Scott had an apprentice, which meant free, a child, somebody younger that was a child of someone. I don't know, because it doesn't capture in here who the child was, everything stuff. But Evan Scott is who made the charges, against him, and so Jacob Madden just couldn't get a break. He just couldn't get a break. But then there's other things. I mean, it's just here's Madden's, various Maddens, and these are in by the time 1860. Here's James Madden, age 21, William Madden, 23, Sophia Madden, 20 years old, everything, affidavit, but descriptions of each of them having, I mean, this poor person, William Madden, left thumb cut off, oof. But you see, description, bright mulatto, everything, born free. Yeah, so these are Maddens that came from, the family. There was another Madden, significant Madden presence in the county, everything. But since this was saying, born free and everything, it's either the case that they were by the time 1860, that they were born around the time that the other Jacob, had been set freed by Mr. Ellicott, or it's from another Madden. And I do have other Maddens, and I'll show you, we're coming to that, may not get ahead of myself. So another family that I'd really like, everything, James Jordan family. And this is 1850, Census James, his wife Kitty, these various children. This is what anybody that's just looking at the census, but I call it behind the census. Here's James Jordan, everything, with a deed of manumission, everything, where he's giving, and what's the year, 1846. So again, this is a couple years before the census taker came around, and he's making provisions here for basically liberating his family and setting them free, everything, which happens. So when there are people who say, and I've heard it before, when people say, whatever, blacks who own slaves. Okay, and I'm not saying that there weren't, I'm not saying widespread across the United States that there weren't Black people who were enslavers. But if you're just looking at it simplistically, if someone had looked and if he hadn't done this deed of manumission in 1846 and had waited until after 1851, Mr. Jordan would have shown up on the slavery schedule for 1850, because that's what the census taker would have recorded, and they would have said because this deed of manumission hadn't been filed, everything else. And in that case, anybody else that's just viewing just that and just the census would think, see, there's a Black person in they're an enslaver too, without knowing the details. You have to go and look to find the details to be able to really know, to have a better chance of knowing what the details are. Because in this case, he said it was his family, which meant that from my records of stuff that I have, of the countless cases of me having of that, of people purchasing themselves and everything else well before the Civil War, and then turning around and setting them free. And that widely varied. I mean, it really just did. It had everything to do with people's understanding of the law, understanding of the rules, or they're not understanding the law and the rules, as it were, which can sometimes happen. But in this case, for whatever reason, he thought that I need to, go ahead and do this. My Negro woman named Kitty, being at the age of 33, you were always, if you're going to do a deed of manumission, you always had to say things like, sufficient, able to gain sufficient livelihood themselves. And that is because the government did not want there to be a drain on government resources. They did not want to have people out in the streets and not able to support themselves, and then the county treasury having to pay to send people to go to the almshouse because they weren't able to do. And that is what would happen, everything. And so this was a mechanism that was put in by the General Assembly and everything else to make sure people are mindful of that you should not be setting people free unless you think that they have a way of being able to take care of themselves. So here's his wife, and here she goes in 1848, everything, and goes and asks the clerk. That's where the power was. It wasn't, she didn't have to do this, because the person that I'm writing the book about, Louisa's parents, they were free a lot longer, for decades before Kitty here, and there is no certificate of freedom for them. They didn't ask for one. They didn't think that they needed one. And that was on them. It was a choice for whether or not you wanted to get one. Kitty chose to go ahead and get one. And maybe that's because she was going to Baltimore. Maybe she was going to be traveling to Baltimore where the markets were going on. And that's a whole other presentation that I could give, but I don't have time today to do it, of like the just how much our county here at this time period and before the Civil War was so interdependent on Baltimore, which is why it drives me crazy to hear people in Howard County now just always bashing Baltimore left and right. If they really knew just how interrelated this county and its history and its wealth too is to Baltimore activities, they would shut up and stop doing that. They would. So here's Kitty. Now, Jordan's, because again, like I said, let me take you back for a second, just so that you remember this. You see here that the children of James, and you see how one of them is Maria. Okay, so this is 1850. So we have some clues, again, of some things that happened. Here is Maria. Her name is Maria Jane Jordan. She was bound as an apprentice to Thomas Isaac. And so that's 8 years after that census, which if the census is correct in terms of the age, then that would be able to tell you what her age was, everything else, when she was bound to Thomas Isaac. And then here in the 1860 census, here she appears, Maria J. Jordan. Everything else, they have her at age 11. Everything is a servant to Thomas Isaac, but that's where that comes from. Everything. And this was very much a thing of, she was bound to him. The ways that people were bound, they would either get bound to someone. Well, I'm going to talk to that in a minute, so let me not say that now because I'm tempted, but I think I put the slide in here. So here's Eliza, who was another family member. Another child, rather, and here's her certificate of freedom, again, that she asked for. But if you just look, when someone's just looking at this and everything, they would, well, okay, manumitted by James Jordan. Well, yes, technically, yes, everything and stuff, but she is, she had been, rescued by her father is what happened. Everything that is, she got, her father took her took his wife and enslaved from an enslaver. Now, so here's another person to talk about, Chloe Brown. Chloe Bacon. Chloe Bacon is somebody, the Bacon family factors prominently also, for free blacks. There's a number of them. Again, I'm just selecting some of them out that off the top of my head, I found to be interesting stories. But here's Chloe in 1850 in the area, being serviced by the Ellicott Mills post office. Everything. William Henry Bacon in the household too, reported next to these folks here. The Matthews family, which is another huge family in Howard County, free black family. Johnson family, Jacksons. These are just people that because I could give a whole talk about the Johnson family. I could give a whole talk about the Johnson family or the Jackson family. Now but what was really interesting about this, take a look at this. This is an indenture made in the year, this is in 1860, and Negro boy William Bacon be approved. So it was justices that were the orphans court judges had basically been told everything like, and a person could just come in and just say, and just give a report to the court and inform and say, hey, there's some free children running around. Over here, some black children, everything, and went on to, I want to make the report. They would inform and drop a dime on them, if you want to call it that way. And this is the situation here with that William Bacon. He had, come in and this was the recording of it. This is down in Annapolis. Here's the law that went into this is the provision in the law that made account specifically for the children of free Negroes and mulattoes. And this was just, there was an apprentice law that was in place for children also, for indigent children, laws on it, but there was a specific one that was created in Maryland law that governed for children of free Negroes that had been the wealthy people of power who had the ear of the legislators. They were able to get their ear, and that's the way that it worked. It still works that way, kind of, sort of, to me too, even in 2023, but anyway. This is the law that every free person would have then been aware of and understanding that this is what could happen. But in this case, Chloe Bacon fought back. It is just amazing when I saw this and everything. I was like, oh, what? I was like, and so to see such powerful language that she used in this document, and to say things like, the indenture was dated in February 14th. I guess that's Valentine's Day. Wow, that's a Valentine's gift. It was done on this date, and there was no opposition, so forth. And then page 2 of the petition, because this is a petition to the court, is what you're looking at here, and everything. And then here's the second part of it and everything, where she basically says in this, look, I knew that this happened, but it was before I understood that the way that they did it, that I had some rights, everything, and that therefore the way that they did it, which is supposed to be, they were supposed to, these orphans court judge, it was supposed to be the case that they asked and hauled the parent into. They hauled the child in and they would put him in jail, everything. So again, sometimes if somebody's looking and seeing that someone is spending time in jail, well, it matters why they were in jail. If you didn't have money to put up for bond and everything, you'd be sitting in jail. That doesn't mean that you committed a crime, by the way. But I've seen records here, older things done decades ago here in this county, history people that just looked at and saw jail a certain time period, and then they just deemed them to be criminals. That's too simplistic. Everything when this kind of stuff is in operation, because the fact of the matter is William Bacon, he would have been called there, and then while they were waiting to be called for the case to be called by the orphans court judges, and this was not a circuit court matter, this is the orphans court matter and everything. So in this one, Chloe said, not my baby, basically is what she said, and everything is, hang on a second. I didn't know, but I've talked to somebody, and I found it. And then to see the person who is for the petitioner, look at that, James McCubbin. Remember that name. See, I tried to make rhyme or reason to every slide that I'm showing here. Tried to make it interconnected. I hope I did a good job, and you'll tell me at the end here. But all right, and then so what the genesis of it here. Here's the thing. So on March 7th, in the case of William Bacon as Matthias Hammond standing ready for trial, the court heard the evidence, and after due deliberation, the indenture was revoked. William got to go back home and have his wages be put to use for the benefit of his mother, Chloe, which is the proper way to do that. And again, it reframes the narrative completely to give the power where the power needed to be, everything else. So I say it, and everything. They tried it, everything, but Chloe fought back. Resistance. And since that is supposed to be the theme of Black History Month, this year, and everything, I chose Chloe to be the story, one of the story. I have about 50 other stories like this, everything else. So they all live in here and everything, and they're on my iPad. But anyway, so now James McCubbin, just a little bit on him, everything. So here's the 1860 census, and what do we find? Well, here's William Bacon, everything else. But see, William Bacon is here, and then you see how it says Richard, and I think that they're trying to say that Richard was Bacon also, everything. So a little bit younger, and everything of him, apprentice to farmer. But what's really interesting about this, if I had to make a guess for what's really going on for here, because here he is that he's bound out here. But understand the difference. The difference here is that this would have been a situation by the time that this came. This was an arrangement then that Chloe, William's mother, she's the one that made this arrangement. And so she's getting the wages. James McCubbin is paying her for the use of, if definitely William, possibly Richard, if that is a thing to say that it's a Bacon also. She got the money from it. Everything. So here we have it. James McCubbin is paying for Chloe's. And because James McCubbin was the attorney, I'm guessing that it was to pay the legal bill. And see, that's a okay. She incurred this debt and everything and stuff, and so she's used the resources that she had to and everything in order to live, which was white children were doing that, so were Black children. So white parents were doing that, indigent, and our county had plenty of poor white people too. We just don't talk about it, but there's plenty of them too. Everything, but this is the situation. Chloe and everything and her children. Now, James McCubbin. Here he is on the slave schedule. This isn't really slave schedule. This is the listing that was created in 1867 by all those enslavers who expressed a desire and decided to put their name down on a piece of paper to say, yes, I would like to get some money from the fact that our state constitution has changed and that we went ahead and abolished, slavery, and it's in our state constitution. We had the 1864 Constitution, and then we had a 1867 Constitution, everything. And there were some provisions that changed everything as one thing, was able to, help Lincoln get put in, to office and for, and so forth. That's the 1864. But then very quickly, people, they got their power back, the folks who had power, and they went to work in the state constitution of 1867 to try to do some other things to try to help those people who felt and who were pissed probably that their free labor source had been kaput. Everything. James McCubbin was one of those people. Not everybody put their name on this list of enslavers. So when I try to correct that every time, there are people who are laboring under the misperception that the names of here, that this is indicative of, oh, well, here's the list of all the people that were owning slaves as of 1867. No, it does not say that at all. No, absolutely not. That's very clearly the list of people. That's why they took the care to write down what they did, to give the ages and all that stuff, because they wanted that, according to the value system, was going to dictate how much they might be able to get. Not everybody did that who was an enslaver. I have several people who are enslavers who just decided, for whatever reason, I guess, maybe they didn't know that this was being done. Or maybe they said, you know what, it seems like it's a lot of work. Because it was a lot of work, paperwork and whatever else. And some people did get compensated. Some Howard Countyans did. The majority of them did not, but some did. But here, James McCubbin, I want to draw your attention here that you see here, Henry, son of, you see, it should be Everline or Everline. And here's Everline up here, age 24. and everything. These are the ages, by the way, that were as of 1864, not their age at 1867 when this record was being done. This has implications for our research and our work on the lynching stuff for our county. Jacob Henson Jr., okay? Which is why this was a nice tie-in to have all this, be here. On the 1860 census, we see here's James McCubbin, here is, I think that's his wife, and everything, wanted first or second, I don't remember, and everything, but here you have free blacks in his household, Ireland's, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, and here is Everline, and with her husband, Jacob. This is Jacob Henson Sr. And then here are some various children, Henry, Henson, Mary, and so forth, and just hang on to those names for a second, because, and so here the 1880 census, again, for our area District 2, here is, again, Jacob Henson Sr., everything, various children, here's James, but this is where you can see then, here is Jacob, this is Jacob Henson Jr., the one that would go on to be lynched later on in our county. And you can see here that so this made the argument, which was to see that these dynamics is what I really want people to see and understand. This is then you're seeing a dynamics that in this household, and that's just an amazing, if you want to just try to think about it in terms of some of these people in this household were enslaved. It was a combination, therefore, of a household that had been enslaved and people who didn't. Jacob Henson Jr. did not know, he didn't know that life. He didn't. Whatever he heard from his siblings, who might have been too young. James, I think it was Mary, who was 17 at this point, but, was 10 years old. I don't know what Mary may have remembered during her time when she had been recorded to be enslaved by Mr. McCubbin, everything with her mother. I'm sure that there were some conversations, interesting conversations in the household and among friends and everything else. But we're about 15 years off of then for when the lynching happened in the county. So, and then here, this is being recorded by the census taker to be not far from, DeCourcy. DeCourcy was one of the trustees for the church, everything else, the black church that was on Merriman Street. That was its standalone church. It was not meeting in the log cabin, the place that is the log cabin. It was separate from the log cabin. The log cabin was Levi Gillis's house that he had made. They had their own church structure, and everything that was nearby, and everything else, of which Mr. DeCourcy was one of the trustees. But I'm just showing you, so DeCourcy, Jacob Henson Jr., these men are they all ended up being trustees, trying to keep what is still in operation, St. Luke AME Church that's sitting on Main Street, that is cat-a-corner from the church. These men, later on in history and everything, DeCourcy's and these folks and everything, here, they started a beneficial society. Here's these men, these names, so here is George Wesley Neal, John Boone, Horace Raveling, William H. Bacon, which is why I pulled it, and everything else, Oliver Scott, James Henson, Gus Smith. These men all collected their resources together and everything else in order to create an organization. This is from the records down at the state archives for organizations, and this was a bona fide organization that they began for the purpose of, they called it what they did and everything, for the purpose of helping other people to do things, to help their fellow citizens. And here's all their marks on that document. This is the history that we're trying to, but also, so as we're getting into these later time periods, also the how you see the progression from the earlier time period going into, which is important to know that stuff before you actually start talking about, standalone things that were written in the newspaper and whatever. And here's another one. Here's the Hall family. That's another family, Nace Hall and everything else. And here it is that he is, he's being purchased by Philip Hawkins and everything else in order to secure his freedom. So, here's another one. And here's Nace Hall then turning around. He gets his freedom. He buys his family too, and then commences to turn around and manumit them and everything, and then makes provisions, for them. But understand too that, for a person who was in this situation, who was technically in the eyes of the law an enslaver, that it was my property, therefore my child was my property. Understand that was also a saving mechanism. He could have, if he had chosen to, gone ahead and manumitted them earlier. The law did not say, but if he had done that, it would have put his children in jeopardy, because in this situation, until they actually got their freedom, if anybody went to go take his children, and there was a whole, that's a whole other talk I could give too, about people like Patty Cannon, who were going around in the state and everything else and capturing free people, free children and older people too and everything, and basically enslaving them, selling them. We all know the story, right, of Solomon Northrop. Everything. So you just weren't immune to that. So, but the good news is that for Mr. Hall and people like him, if somebody had done that, it would have been a crime. You're stealing property then, as weird as that sounds and as ugly as that sounds. But for this time period, it is what it is, everything else. But he would have had then the power, anybody in this situation, to go ahead and to be able to prosecute somebody for, well, you took my property. And that would have been a reason why to put these provisions in, to say, okay, well, because he could have. I have records of people who did set people free earlier. It was your decision about what you made, what you want to do. But there were repercussions and benefits to your decisions, as we all know with everything with life anyway. So in getting ready to close here. So this is the 1860 Martinet map. I wanted to say there have been clues all along for some of this. Okay. So here you have so this is Sophia Madden, who was a homeowner, everything else. And I have her deed and lots of, stuff about her too, everything stuff. Here's another gentleman, last name of Mars and everything. If people were looking at things like this to be evidence of, and it is evidence. But again, it's not, when you look at, and for those of you that know and understand that our nonprofit found through our research initiative, our roundtable research, of which I have two members here that stayed the whole time, and a third who was with us for at least about half of it, maybe or so, I forget, everything. As we all know, you see this is Levi Gillis. Well, he's not marked as being, that would, and so. And I will say to you then, they're more like that too. You're just not seeing them. It does take actually having to look through this combination of all these things to try to give birth to, this story. And so, here's the 1850, and then so Levi Gillis, and here he's recorded. He is not shown here with owning any property yet, and then it's because the deed is 1851. He bought land in 1851, but here is his free family. And everything, living 1850, being serviced by the Ellicott Mills post office. And here's his house. Before it got the logs got dismantled log by log, stored for 9 years, and then rebuilt and put up where it is now on Main Street. But this is his house. That's his house in the original location, of it. So he very much had a presence. Boy, did I. I mean, but I'm trying to let everybody know then. And he certainly wasn't alone. He's actually late in the game, is what I guess I'm trying to tell you, everything, because of these other stories, of people. And that's just so exciting to know then that that means then that he's living in LA City. He would have been interfacing where very likely. He might have seen these people as they're going down to the courthouse, as they're traveling into town to come and see such and such, as they're trying to maybe go on the railroad, to go down to the B&O and everything, to go to Baltimore, to go do such and such and everything else. The cover of our book, because of course I'm going to plug it and I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to say it and everything else. I don't have all the history that I just talked to you about in here because that was not our purpose and everything for it. By the way, we reworked the cover. I mean, for those of you who are with the scrutinizing eye, I had to rework it because I'm picky, and there was something about the right corner of it that I didn't like on the draft and everything. So I had the cover designer rework it, and then I went ahead and just took some liberties to rechange some things and to make some things a little bit more prominent. But this is the final of our book, where we have information then about all this, about how we figured this out, about Levi Gillis, about these free men who were living there. Sometimes they're free wives and children, also enslaved ones, but ever present, which is why, I'll say it again, I've said it before, I'm going to say it here again. This is Levi. This is meant to characterize Levi, to emphasize this is meant to be Levi Gillis here, chopping wood at his cabin. Okay. This is before Thomas Isaac bought it from him. Okay. In the background, this is Merriman Street. I had I had the designer, the cover artist Jalen, I asked her specifically to put some elements. I said, I want you to convey that this is the railroad and it's there because, you know, the presence of the railroad and what that means. And there's a whole other stuff that just isn't told about that either yet. It's coming and everything. But this right here, this is a red flag that is outside, meant to be, and it's inside the cover of the book and everything. It talks this is meant to be shown, be flying outside of Disney's Tavern, which was around the corner on Main Street. The red flag outposted when it was prominent meant there was a slave sale going on. It was the universal symbol that they would do to advertise that. And I wanted this to be in here. And so everybody getting this book will read that in the front cover about this cover and what it was really meant to exemplify, to state this, that I know for certain that Levi Gillis would have had to be ever mindful, ever present, and ever always thinking about the fact that despite the fact that he was free, despite the fact that he was born free, despite the fact that his family, despite the fact that he owned a place, despite the fact that he bought land, he built this cabin, he's doing all the things that he's doing there. Yeah, despite all that stuff, if he were to find himself to be afoul of the law, he could get swept up on charges. There were certain types of charges that if you were found guilty for it, you got sold into slavery. And Daniel Hopkins is an example of that, which I've talked about before and everything, and he's in our book and everything. So that is, that is the why for our cover of our book. There's our logo, and I think there's some more buttons to push. So questions?
A lot of work. I know how much work that is.
Yes, thank you, Rita.
The McCubbin name. Is it, I remember hearing about a McCubbin that was related to the Carols by Mary. Is that him? And it may not be the same one, but one of them changed his last name to Carroll so that he could inherit some of the Carroll estate.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Rita. It's about, and for those people at home and everything, well, I don't know or not, but for the recording, the question is about McCubbin, and is the McCubbin that we featured that was on here, is it the same as there was a McCubbin who changed his last name to Carroll? I can't definitively say if it is. I'd have to go back and look through the 15,000 whatever pictures, images, trying to try to find it, everything to see if captured. What I will say is this, though. I was always fascinated by the stories, and there are many of them. How many people that before, when they were going to die, they're making out their will. And boy, did they seem to have a thing about it. I mean, if they had a relative who just didn't, they would make them as a provision in the will and tell them, you must change your name. And if you're not going to change your name and everything, you won't get this. Which one do you want to do? You want to you want to have your last name be this, or do you want to have it be this and everything? Which makes it interesting to be able to trace and track people, and sometimes a little challenging and everything. So, but what I'll say in general about the McCubbin, this McCubbin, who is an attorney, comes from a line of McCubbins who were also attorneys. I would doubt that this McCubbin was from that line. He was an attorney too. He was very well known, everything stuff. And yeah, he's there. McCubbins that went all the way back in the 1700s, easily, and maybe even beyond that and everything else that we're doing. So in Anne Arundel County was the trade area and stuff, and this is just the McCubbin that landed here in our specific area. So, other questions? Yes, sir.
On slide 44. By the name of Jacob Henson, 7 years old.
Here. Well, 41.
Is he the one
Slide
who
4.
in fact was the,
Okay, this is slide 44, but
would been on 43?
okay, I'll find. Well, this is Henson. Is it here? Well, this is Henson. Is it? Well, that's Henson. Matt, you and Jacob. Yeah, Henson, right? Well, that's the dad. No. Well, this is the father. This is senior.
Was he the Jacob Henson that was the last man to be lynched?
This isn't, but his son is. So this is senior. This is Jacob Henson Senior, and this is just so this is, and these are son, James and Mary. These are their children that are living there in the house. This is then a decade later, here's the same Jacob Henson Sr. and here's Junior. So he wasn't around. So yes, this is the same. This is the one that the cursor's pointing at. That's the one that unfortunately was lynched in 1890. Was 5.
Is that the one that was lynched?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And his age when he was lynched. Any idea?
I'd have to look at, I didn't put it in here and everything and stuff, but he was working for I mean, you can, if you look at this, we can calculate up and everything and to say that, yeah, if he's about
He was one of the last to be lynched.
last recorded lynching victim. Yes. He's the last recorded. We have other lynching activity that our nonprofit is, so we capture all of it because that's what the state commission encourages us to do too. So we call it the culture, the climate in which lynchings were able to exist is important to examine, which is why our nonprofit does the research the way we do it. We were not going to just look at Jacob Henson Jr. That's what people were telling us in the beginning, and that was the prevailing a couple of years ago when the state commission got formed. Oh, we don't really have anything to see here in Howard County because it's just really Jacob Henson. Everything is just, we don't have anything to see. I mean, if y'all want to come here, you can, but we don't have anything to see here. No, we do have things. Yes, we do. We have a lynching culture here to see.
He was falsely accused of what?
Well, we'll get into that. Trust me when I say our nonprofit has a whole thing planned. We're not at Jacob Henson Jr. The next person that we are going to be talking about, and it should be, I'm going to be releasing the programming dates for that, is Nicholas Snowden. He's coming first. We are doing things chronologically. Yes. So who was lynched? So we are addressing him and again, to give full humanity to him and any of his descendants and so forth. I really put a lot of work into capturing various things about him and about his story and about the lynching and so forth to really do that, really to do it the justice that it deserves. Everything. So we're going to come to him first and everything. And then Jacob is a decade later after that. So, but trust me when I say we're getting that, but Jacob has the precursor is what I'm doing with Nicholas, just to show, I mean, I'm looking at other court cases, other this, other that, to just really, so that people, I try to transplant people back down. We're all in 2023. I try to do it in a way that tries to put people back into that time period so that they can have a better understanding, because there are a lot of things that did not work back then the way that they do for us now. And so I have to try my best to get people to put down their 2023 glasses and pick up these. And so that's next for Nicholas and everything else. Then I think we have another near lynching or two to discuss briefly, and it'll be on our website. And then there's still some things being finalized with Henson's story, again, to really be able to, it is much more bigger story than just the newspaper. I mean, I have all the newspaper things, but no, that's one segment of the story, what was being reported in the newspaper. We have there's a lot to say with that, but he's going to get the most because there was so much emphasis that was put on. There was so much more information about him, but it's going to be like a series. It'll be there's a couple different elements to really divulge to the community. Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sir?
I'm delighted to be here today because I've been involved in my DNA puts my roots right here in Howard County.
Yes, Michael Mitchell.
Family goes back to the early 1800s. My great-grandfather was Charles Henry Carroll, and his brother William Carroll, his wife Rachel, is the book that
Louisa
is doing, and I just want to commend you for your scholarship in terms of doing the research necessary to keep revisionists from changing the history struggle of people of color in this county and this state.
Yes.
Because there's so